There goes President Lee Jae-myung to have lunch with party floor leaders and representatives on the first day of his office. Now, the brand new government and its rebooting of the country's diplomacy will be put at test, especially with its strongest ally with the U.S. How to further nourish Seoul-Washington ties under the Lee Jae-myung administration. We connect with Dr. Patrick Cronin. Hello there.
Hello.
He is the chair for Asia Pacific Security at the Hudson Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, the U.S. was quick to welcome the current Lee Jae-myung administration with an emphasis on tight ROK-U.S. alliance. Now, it's only a matter of time before a phone call between President Lee and U.S. President Donald Trump takes place, right?
I would assume by tomorrow, yes.
Well, if that does take place, what do you think the two leaders will discuss in the first phone call?
Well, I remember when President Trump was congratulated by President Yoon, it was about a 10-minute phone call, and that was longer than usual. But even if it's only 5 or 6 minutes, there's plenty of time to set out an agenda and make some common connection between President Lee and President Trump. They're both survivors of assassination attempts. They're both interested in technology and industrialization. They're both interested in diplomacy, trying to ease tensions and actually reach out directly to leaders like Kim Jong-un. So they have a lot of common areas, but they also need some deals to think about. And I think and this is going back to November when President Yoon and President Trump had a successful phone call, they mentioned shipbuilding, which was an unexpected idea of a deal. I hope there's something like that in this sort of short congratulatory call that Lee Jae-myung can mention that's in the interest of what he wants to do with his agenda that matches with what President Trump may want.
Well, they have a lot in common, but also a lot to overcome together. Anxieties over the security alliance with the U.S. are also hanging in the air, namely North Korea being a persistent challenge. How can the Lee and Trump administrations work together against Pyongyang's ever-growing military threats, do you think?
Well, dialogue is very important, and I think both leaders are interested in dialogue directly, personal dialogue, but it's not sufficient. This is Frederick the Great, that diplomacy without arms is like music without instruments. So you're going to have a strong, capable alliance, and Lee Jae-myung has talked repeatedly on the campaign trail in the past about the ironclad alliance, but he also most recently today talked mostly about diplomacy and soft power. He does need to remember that South Korea needs to be strong and ready, just as his very first phone call with the Joint Chiefs of Staff today indicated that he was interested in making sure that the Korean forces were, with the Combined Forces Command, ready. And I think that's the right message to send for strength, and then reach out with diplomacy and figure out ways to ease tensions over time.
I do have to mention, while not stormy, but things have certainly been bumpy between South Korea and the U.S. in recent months, from tariffs to the defense cost-sharing deal. Dr. Cronin, what do you think should President Lee's first step be for his government to take for, healthier Seoul-Washington relations?
Well, I've written a report recently suggesting there are a number of issues, both on the economic and on the security agenda, that could make possible deal making. President Trump likes deals. He likes big round numbers. He likes big shiny projects. So, whether that's artificial intelligence and technology, whether it's something to do with the defense industrial base capacity, there are areas where they can come together. Chips, ships, a lot of areas that are of common interest to the two countries. And I think they need to figure out a couple of deals that they can work on that will allow President Lee to have credibility and leverage with President Trump, who's looking for strong leaders to deal with. So it's very important for them to find those footholds, because there are going to be bumps in the road, even with those deals in the offing.
Trump does like fancy deals, and he's also preoccupied with his, own matters, just to name a few, the Ukraine war, the Gaza war, now, another spat with Harvard University. But Trump will one day reach out to North Korea, or has already. How can Seoul make sure we are not left out there?
Well, it's very important for South Korea to insist on close coordination with what's happening. President Trump has indicated that he has already communicated with North Korea. It's not clear that North Korea has really sent anything meaningfully back, but I think we should expect there to be some high-level personal communications directly between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. And we're going to need to make sure that Lee Jae-myung is part of that discussion going forward. I'm just finishing up a report we're issuing with the Che Institute and Hudson Institute this month that's going to talk about how President Trump and Kim Jong-un may proceed with their personal high-level diplomacy. And there's a range of views. There's no one set sort of approach, and there's no one timetable, but it's likely to happen this year.
You know, when talking about U.S. relations, we cannot not talk about China. How can the new Lee Jae-myung administration avoid, walking on eggshells with regard to Washington and Beijing and maintain stable ties with both of them?
You know, one of the messages from Secretary of Defense Hegseth at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore was essentially a warning to allies that they can't have it both ways. If they're going to have a close security defense alliance with the United States, they're going to have to think about China and not just other issues. And this really does apply to Korea. Even that's the case, remember, the Trump administration is also torn about what is its China policy. Is it the Secretary of Treasury Bessent's trade deals that's about to be made? Or is it the Secretary of Defense's approach about communist China and we must be ready for the fact that they could have imminent use of force? And the answer is it's both of those things that we have to be ready for. So at least Korea needs to be ready to be a strong ally, even without naming potential countries as threats. And that's more or less the approach of previous, especially liberal governments, where we've always managed to get along and keep the alliance strong despite ideological differences between a conservative American president and a more liberal South Korean president.
The new South Korean government certainly needs a more delicate, mindful, and careful diplomatic approach. Dr. Cronin, thank you so much for connecting with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.